The healthiest foods on the planet are not created in a lab. Even with all the wonderful science advancements that we have had, the healthiest foods on the planet can be grown from a seed in a pot on your balcony, basically. And just going through residency or in medical school, or a young attending physician not knowing any of the lifestyle medicine stuff, if I had heard of one patient who had their diabetes reversed because of diet and exercise, I would have been totally blown away. And I think we should continue to be blown away by this because it is so empowering. So you mentioned, what about the standard American diet is so damaging?
Welcome to the Crisco and Company podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Lee Crisco. Our guest today is Dr. Jeff Pierce. Dr. Pierce is passionate about using a whole food plant-based diet and other lifestyle modalities to help people get healthier, get off medications, and live longer, fuller lives. His goal is to meet patients where they are and work with them at their pace to improve their health one day at a time. He's board certified in both family medicine and lifestyle medicine, and he has licenses in California, Florida, and Texas. He is currently accepting new patients with the amazing telemedicine platform, love.life telehealth. I'll post a link to this in the comments below, along with his Instagram page. Jeff, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Lee. Thank you so much for having me on today.
Well, you're more than welcome. You know, one question I really like to ask patients is, how did you fall into the whole food plant-based lifestyle?
Well, I grew up in Texas, eating a typical American, typical Texan diet. And I think in college, I saw an HBO special on factory farming, factory animal farming. And I really had no idea up until watching that documentary what was going on in the animal meat sector and whatnot. And so that really blew me away, changed my eating practices to eating vegetarian, but I was still eating eggs and dairy. And then fast forward many years later, when I met my wife, started eating much healthier than my bachelor life. And that was 10 years ago when we got married, almost 11. And after that, I stumbled upon a body of work by the people that you and many of your listeners know well, Michael Greger and Neil Barnard and Michael Clapper and Scott Stoll and Dean Ornish, et cetera, et cetera. It's a long list of folks that have done research and writing about the benefits of eating more plant-based. And I was pretty floored because I hadn't been talking to my patients about this. I had been eating the way I was for a sort of personal ethical reason, and actually didn't know if it was particularly healthy or not. But as I delved into that literature, I realized, wow, this is something that I should be sharing to my patients so everyone's lives can get better.
Yeah. Well, for me, it was kind of just a happenstance thing. I was driving to work one day and I was listening to this little YouTube video. It was like 2 or 3 minutes long, talking about vitamin B12. And I always thought, well, plant-based diets are ridiculous because you don't have any B12 in it, right? How could it possibly be physiological? And they had an excerpt of Dr. Greger talking, and he pointed out that B12 is really a bacterial contaminant, that animals ingest, and then, we ingest it, but it really primarily comes from bacteria. And if all we did was drink untreated water, which is not really a good idea, we would get enough B12. And so I thought, wow, gee, that's a different spin on things. And so I got Dr. Greger's book, and I was just blown away by it. It's like, what? I've been a doctor for decades now. Like, I didn't get this memo. So anyways, I've just been totally consumed by it. And a few years later, met Joyce, and, it was life-changing for her. She was blown away by it. And she'd worked a lot in the healthcare industry, for her whole life, had no awareness of this information. And, you know, I'd spent a lot of time selling medications and that sort of thing and realized this is where the real answers are as far as, you know, getting people healthy. So the next thing you know, we've got this YouTube channel, and I'm working on a book on the whole thing, and it's become a big part of our life. But now you have done a lot of work in as a doctor in the third world. Can you tell us about that?
Sure, happy to talk about it. When I was in undergraduate, I went to a University of Texas Pan American, is what it was called back then, and it was pretty much right on the border with between Texas and Mexico. And so I did a little. I went for a 1 day sort of clinic where docs from the U.S. came down and they needed people to interpret for them, and it was in Mexico. And I was blown away by how different the healthcare, the availability of certain medications and the availability of access to docs and stuff, how different it was on the other side of the border, just, 20 minutes across the border. Um, and that is where my interest really started in it. And then from there, did work in research work and direct patient care work in South America, Central America, Africa, and a little bit in Asia. And it was an area where I definitely specialized in doing HIV, TB, malnutrition. The malnutrition work I did there was in Africa, in areas where kids had tuberculosis and HIV and didn't have access to a whole lot of healthy food in a very often drought and famine riddled area, or hunger at least riddled area, called Lesotho, which is a lovely kingdom in southern Africa. And it was very unlike my work that I did in most of my training in the United States. It was very rewarding. Um, and when I came back to the U.S. And settled down with starting a new family, I continued to do some of that off and on, and also some high risk obstetrics, all the time teaching family docs in training about those things. And then was so excited that I could then add my new training and interest in lifestyle medicine to that bigger picture.
So when you were doing that work in the third world, had you been educated at that point on the plant-based thing, or uh,
This was before that, and so the focus was almost always on acute care. Someone comes in with malaria or the like, or chronic care related to infectious diseases. So helping, I was in working in a wonderful program through Baylor College of Medicine and Texas Children's Hospital, where we were rolling out some of the first HIV treatments to kids and their families in Southern Africa. And the my only knowledge of nutrition at that point was dealing with a child who came in acute, severe malnutrition, and then when back in the States saw that we suffered from malnutrition, but in a different way, from sort of over access and overconsumption of unhealthy calories and not enough of the really healthy stuff like the fruits, vegetables, legumes, and whole grains.
yeah. So anything specific that these kids were deficient in, or was it just kind of just not enough food at all?
It was a mixture. Some had what is called kwashiorkor, and which is are the kids that come in pretty edematous, pretty puffy looking, and on first look you might just think, oh, this baby's extra chubby, but it's fluid weight, and there's a certain degree of protein malnutrition in that. But then there are also kids who came in just totally emaciated, who had general calorie deprivation, and you know when you sometimes there's enough calories and enough nutrition to get along, but then when a serious infection like tuberculosis or HIV or both strike a kid in that already marginal setting, it tips them over the edge. And so that was incredibly rewarding work. I was very lucky and honored to be accepted into into the warm hearts of the folks in Lesotho and in the other African countries that I was working in, and it changed my view as a human being, and certainly as a physician. And Now, in lots of parts of the developing world where access to calories and ultra processed food is increasing, and less of a uh, love and respect for some of the traditional staples, we're starting to see a lot of the chronic conditions like type 2 diabetes and heart disease and lifestyle associated cancers increase their prevalence in some of these countries where there beforehand it had been sort of a, oh, let's just deal with the infections, and that's the most important part. And so now there's definitely an influence on what we call non-communicable diseases at the level of the World Health Organization, and so maybe there'll be some more lifestyle medicine work to do in the future, abroad in my future.
Now, here's a question for you. I mean, if you had a child that comes in, they're malnourished and or they have an infectious disease, did you have access to the resources that you need in terms of medication and improved nutrition to actually help them?
We did, because we were a well-funded, we were a non-governmental organization working with the government of Lesotho. And so we were lucky enough to have access to HIV medicines and TB medicines and acute nutritional packets, peanut butter based things, and whatnot. And the U.S. was supplying things like grains and oils and things like that. So we were lucky enough to have access to a lot of the things that we needed. Yep, that's certainly
Yeah,
not
I
always
was
the case.
just I was just working on a script for a little YouTube video, and I was pointing out that for the amount of food that we feed to animals here in the United States, we could
Hmm.
feed 800 million people, which is more than the number of people in the world that are actually starving right now, which is there's just something so perverse about that.
Yeah, the it is inefficient running calories that we grow, running them through an animal to eat certain parts or products of an animal. It's much more efficient just to grow the right crops that we eat ourselves, and then everybody's healthier and happier, actually.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, Now, I think one thing that's happening now in the Western societies is we're seeing, as you said, a different form of malnutrition. And, a lot of these kids are getting overweight, they're getting diabetes, fatty liver. I'm a radiologist, so I see a lot of fatty liver, seeing that in kids. And one of the theories is that people are overeating because the food is so lacking in nourishment that they just keep eating to seek out that nourishment. And that's why people are getting overweight. This is something I'm really curious to get your thoughts on, is growing our own food, because we actually have a garden, and we've been doing some of that. What are your thoughts about that? I understand you're quite the expert gardener.
Hmm. Well, thanks for asking about that. I love talking about it, and it's neat to see that you and Joyce are gardening as well. Um, I mostly get to thank my wife for getting me into this, because I couldn't keep a houseplant alive before I met her, and now we grow a large portion of our fruits and veg, and I think we just got into it. I got into it because that's what she did and said that I should get into, and so I did. But it's really grown on me over the last decade, because you the healthiest foods on the planet are not created in a lab. Even with all the wonderful science advancements that we have had, the healthiest foods in the planet can be grown from a seed in a pot on your balcony, basically. And that's just, I think, humbling and grounding, to the point that uh, I would not feel like a whole person if I wasn't growing something for myself and for our family. So yeah, we live in Northern California in a pretty mild climate. And so we get away with growing a pretty wide variety of things. We have a long growing season, and we have a city lot. It's not acreage in the countryside or anything. We have a city lot, and so we do a lot of what we consider urban gardening, but just have tons of fruit trees and right now we've got a plethora of kale and chard and collards and life's good in the garden right now.
Yeah, I mean, well, actually, I got to admit, Joyce does most of the work. It's something that she's really interested in doing, but we get a ton of food out of it. We actually have a hard time getting through it all. Um, we're able to grow so much, and there's nothing like pulling fresh vegetables right out of the garden and eating them right away. Um,
Yeah.
it's
And then have extra to share with loved ones. I mean, you don't you get a workout, you get your hands in the soil, you get the sunshine and the
right.
nature, and you get produce to share with loved ones. And so it's such a great habit stack as compared to, hey, I'm going to go to the gym for one thing, I'm going to go to the bar with my friends for another, for the social aspect. You get so many of things in one activity.
Yeah. Now, tell us about this love.life telehealth.
Mm.
Um, that's an innovative idea to have a bunch of plant-based doctors available online to help people out. Tell us about your experience with that.
Sure. I am very lucky to be practicing amongst a group of docs that are we're all family medicine trained originally, and then boarded additionally a lifestyle medicine. And we do telehealth between the handful of us in the group. We cover all 50 states. Um, Medicine in the United States is kind of interesting that way. You're licensed in individual states instead of just licensed to see patients in the U.S. And so, like you mentioned, I cover three big states, but some of us in the group have something like 15, 20, 25 different states that they cover. And it's just a real pleasure and an honor to meet with these folks. We meet a couple of times a month to talk about, challenging patient cases or how do we make the platform better. Um, and we have 30-minute and 60-minute appointments where we beforehand review labs and studies and questionnaires so that those 30 and 60 minutes we're really high use talking about things that are going to make a big difference. And for me as a provider, I mean, what a nice break from the another patient every 10 or 15 minutes to where you have just enough time to write another prescription or a request for some sort of imaging, and not a whole lot of time to talk about getting to the root cause of things. And I know that's something that you and Joyce talk about getting to the core essence of, is it that you need a fourth diabetes medicine, or do we need to spend more time really parsing out how to potentially reverse your diabetes altogether? And that's pretty hard to do in a 10-15 minute appointment. So I really appreciate the chance to work with such a great group of folks, and the people who started it and are just good souls as well, Lori Marbus and Anthony Masiello. And now we're part of a bigger group working with John Mackey, who started Whole Foods. And what an honor to get to work with somebody with such experience uh, and future vision. And so I think it's a great place to be.
Yeah, I mean, I find it really encouraging, that love.life telehealth exists and that John Mackey is doing what he's doing. One thing I just kind of rail about is how the healthcare system does not really deal with root causes. Perfect example. Um, just a few days ago, me and one of the techs were working on uh, optimizing a protocol for assessing gastrointestinal bleeds. And sure enough, a couple of days later, we have the opportunity to use it. And, it showed exactly where the patient was bleeding from on the CT scan. And that's great. They will help in their intervention to deal with this problem. The thing that concerns me is the guy was literally just within a few days of my age, um, tons of colonic diverticuli, which are come from eating a lifelong low fiber diet. No one's probably going to tell him that it was his diet that probably caused this problem in the first place. Joyce was just editing another video talking about gallstones, and she spliced in a clip of Dr. Dennis Burkitt talking with Dr. John McDougall. We just got it posted like an hour ago or something. And way back when, he was talking about the importance of lifestyle and dietary fiber. That was back in the 30s and 40s. And here we are, 75 years later, or whatever, and it's still largely not integrated into the day-to-day practice of healthcare, which I personally find that really disturbing. I mean, and sort of the fantasy is if we can just design enough new fancy MRI pulse sequences and optimize our CT scans and come up with, more and more diabetes meds that, rather than spending, what is it, $4.9 trillion per year on healthcare, if we can get that up to 5.9 trillion, everybody's going to be healthy. And it's just such a grand illusion, really, when, it's really about what's at the end of our fork.
That's a great point. I mean, you're doing such high tech medicine when you're in the radiology suite, and thankful for it, right? The gentleman who was bleeding, that you picked up on that protocol, was helped by that high tech medicine. But what's beautiful about what you're doing is that you're also doing the low tech medicine, which is talking to people about root cause. And you bring up Dr. Burkett, who of course was doing surgery in Africa, and just wasn't seeing the appendicitis and the colon cancer and the diverticulosis and the gallstones to the same degree as he was seeing in his home country. And because I can't remember actually if he was from the
I think it
UK
was
or
Ireland. I think it was
yeah,
Ireland.
that's
Yeah.
right. And it was night and day in the difference in these GI conditions, and the diets, of course, were night and day different. And so if we can just get such a low cost, low tech intervention, that people eat more fiber rich foods, like Dr. Will B said, that you interviewed in the past. What a cool discussion. Just eating more fiber would fix so many problems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So when patients come to you at love.life, I obviously they're somewhat of a pre-selected group open to the idea of plant-based nutrition. Is that a correct assumption?
It's true. I currently have two really interesting, distinct, different practices. One is the group at love.life telehealth, where folks are paying out of pocket. They are a self-selected group who is quite motivated to say, I'm going to uh, reach deep down, pay for half an hour, with Dr. Pierce or any of the other docs on the team, and we're going to take things to the next level. And then what I also do every week is I work with a group of folks who are at a county healthcare system, who are all on the California equivalent of Medicaid, who are pregnant or postpartum, and we get together for a group visit talking about plant-based diets with a cooking demo, and they get groceries delivered to their house. And so they're coming from two different stages of the sort of readiness for change scale oftentimes. But I think both groups show benefit. And so there's something for everybody, whether they have never really thought about eating tofu, to someone who's been eating plant-based for 20 years, but need a little help doing A, B, or C.
Yeah. I think one of the biggest challenges with this plant-based thing is sort of you're working against lifelong established habits and cultural biases. Um, and, there's at times I'm actually very critical of the healthcare system. But on the other hand, working in the hospital that I work at, I see the dilemma of these primary care doctors. They've got to get the patients through. Most of these people, they're, farmers, indoctrinated into the whole system of, growing plants to feed the animals. It's a major cultural shift. How do you address that in a 10, 15-minute visit? I can see how that's legitimately a difficult problem. So when you're working for the county, do you have time to talk about these things?
Well, in the typical um, patient visit where you have about 15 minutes per patient, that's really difficult. The beauty of of the group setting is that we might be together for an hour and a half every week during their pregnancy and postpartum period. And so there's a lot more time to really get into what are the benefits? Okay, you believe the benefits, but how do we make it happen? How do we do it cost effectively? How do we do it easily? How do we make the healthy choice the easy choice? And so that's the benefit of doing it in a group setting week after week. But yeah, I won't. I'm the first to admit that I'm spoiled by having 30 and 60-minute appointments with folks who are already motivated enough to schedule that appointment at Love Life Telehealth, as compared to the busy family doc or nurse practitioner or internal medicine doc or pediatrician, et cetera, who's got to get through 10, 15, 20 patients in a half day. And they may have come with three things. The patient might have three things that are more important to them in the moment than learning about the importance of eating, more veggies. It's
Yeah.
challenging.
Yeah. I mean, what we would like to see is that there's some way that patients are farmed out to a program or whether so they can get educated. I actually used to be a family doctor. That's what I did originally. I did a family medicine residency in Canada, and I worked as a family doctor for 3 years. And it was actually an incredible experience. I mean, it was an incredible experience. We didn't have the level of resources that we do now, and getting a CT scanner was like pulling teeth. Less dependency on specialists and whatnot. There just wasn't as much availability. I worked in the office, worked on the hospital wards, worked in the emergency department. But one of the things that really motivated me to be a family doctor is I wanted to be in primary care to actually make people healthy. And one of my personal sources of frustration with family medicine is, I did it for a while and I thought, I'm not really getting anybody healthy. Now, I didn't have the knowledge that I have now. I but the thing is, we have tools now. We have knowledge now. I think it can really help people. So I ended up in the diagnostic end of medicine, which and I really enjoy it. I mean, I actually really do enjoy it. But do you have any really good success stories that come to mind that really, as far as changing their diet and reaping health benefits?
Sure. I just want to say one thing based on what you had said that really spoke to me, because you said you didn't feel when you're doing your family medicine work, you didn't feel like you're getting people healthy. And when I look back at what did I do for the first 15 or so years after finishing residency, was always that acute care stuff that was so rewarding. Shifts in the ED where you saved somebody with an intubation, or doing a quick C-section and helping to save the baby, or helping somebody treat their cerebral malaria in Africa. And it was getting people healthy that was so rewarding. So many of us go into medicine to help heal people. And the system is such that a busy primary care practice, you sometimes feel that you're putting multiple fingers in the holes in the dike without actually getting people healthier. And it's not a fault, by and large, of the providers. It's just that the system is built against us. Um, so, so as far as success stories, I mean, I feel on one level, I feel like with a different perspective now of, oh, did I just save that person's life with that emergency procedure? It's different than that, right? But I do feel like, just thinking week after week, when I'm hearing some of these comments from the women in our pregnancy group at the county clinic, um, just little comments such as, I never knew the importance of these things that we're talking about with food, and I'm so motivated to make change. And my mother-in-law, who lives in the house with me, has started cooking and eating with us the food that I'm making, and her hemoglobin A1C is going down, and the kids are starting to eat more stuff. And even though that's just a couple of meals or just a couple of weeks, and this slight sort of change in the long trajectory of looking at her family and her kids, there's this potential for really changing the trajectory of someone's life with this stuff, generation after generation, and a ripple effect to where I can give somebody insulin and it can help them. But when you help folks know the foods that will help reverse their insulin resistance and get to the root cause of their diabetes, then that's a ripple effect that they can spread to many people. And so it's just, it grows exponentially. So that's on one level, just talking about something that might seem kind of mild, like, yeah, my mother-in-law is starting to cook these foods with us, where it might not sound as a huge success, but I think that it does have the potential for that. But for folks who practice the kind of medicine that you and I do, it's almost, it's surprising how it's no longer surprising when you say things like, oh yes, I have this patient that used to be on insulin who is now off of all medications and has a normal 3-month average of their blood sugar. Their hemoglobin A1C has come down to the normal range, and having come off of all their medicines. Or somebody is no longer having the kinds of flare-ups of their autoimmune condition and stuff like that. It's just we've seen so many examples of these success stories of getting out of our own way and letting our body heal itself, that it's almost amongst the docs who are talking about it, who are doing that kind of medicine, it's just almost not surprising anymore. But at the core of it, if you had told me when I was just going through residency or in medical school, or a young attending physician, not knowing any of the lifestyle medicine stuff, if I had heard of one patient who had their diabetes reversed because of diet and exercise, I would have been totally blown away. And I think we should continue to be blown away by this, because it is so empowering.
Yeah, well, actually, one of the things that happened with me is, I've told this story before, but, I read Dr. Greger's book, then I read Dr. McDougall's book, and he's very explicit, for best results, primarily eat carbohydrates. And I was really skeptical. I was kind of in this low carb thing, and I was, big and strong, and, but, I had sky high cholesterol. It was 330. I was technically pre-diabetic because I was getting fasting sugars over 100. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to just suspend my disbelief. I'm going to give this a try for a week or so. I'll just see what happens. My blood sugar is going to go sky high. I'm going to start to gain weight. Well, my blood sugar dropped like a rock, and I felt fine. Like it dropped, like literally it was 2 or 3 days. My fasting blood sugar was 65, and I felt fine. I got my cholesterol checked again, and it dropped down to 143, no medication. So I was just totally sold on this thing. And I found that my exercise capacity increased. I could really work out longer and harder. I sort of think that these rules about, you don't want to exercise too much, you don't want to overtrain. I think that applies to people that are eating a meat-based diet. Like Joyce pointed out this morning, she's there. I worked out with weights for about an hour and 45 minutes, just a long time, did some stretching. Then we went for a bike ride. She said, we got back from the bike ride. She said, did you know you've been exercising for like 4 hours? And I said, no, it's only been 3. And, but I attribute that to the plant-based diet. I feel fine. And I've got a day off tomorrow. I'm probably going to do the same thing. Weather's good. Probably go for a nice long bike ride. That applies to people. Those concerns about overtraining, I think, apply to people that are eating like a standard American diet. But it's interesting, Joyce is a general aviation pilot. She's got a small plane. So she gets up, whenever she can. So she's at this airport. It's about 8 miles from here. She houses her plane. And there's a guy that she runs into and chit chats with. I believe he's like late 60s, early 70s, somewhere around there. They had like a brief 10-minute conversation about 3 or 4 months ago. And she explained, the importance of going on a higher carbohydrate, lower fat diet. Told him to read Mastering Diabetes by Cyrus and Robbie. And so a few months later, she's getting in a car and this guy's rushing up to her and she goes, who's this guy? Who's this guy accosting me? Well, it turns out it was the same guy. He'd lost 30 pounds. His blood sugar levels were improving. His hemoglobin A1C was on the way down, lost a ton of weight, looked like a completely different human being. And so anyways, she's been giving me some further counseling, but that is unbelievably gratifying to, fundamentally change a person's health like that. And, that's what we found so motivating. And he made a very important comment to her the other day. He's there. Why doesn't anybody know about this? Like, why aren't doctors, telling people about this? And I think that's an important question. And, what motivates us is to try to, educate people and sort of spread the word and uh, deal with problems when they're manageable before they become, a raging GI bleed or, liver failure from fatty liver or whatever. So those are the sorts of things that really motivate us. Um, do you have any specific comments about what it is about the standard American diet that is so destructive to people?
Yes, and you mentioned that gentleman who said, "Why aren't more people talking about this? Um, why aren't we hearing it from all our docs or seeing it as national recommendations as much?" It's I just did want to comment on some of it's the time crunch that we've talked about. Some of it clearly is the lack of training, because in med school and residency, even cardiologists, those who are in charge of our heart, with heart disease being the greatest killer on amongst adults in the United States, they get almost no nutrition training, and so part of it's the time crunch, parts of the nutrition training, lack thereof, and then part of it I think is yeah, a lot of docs out there just since we trained in a pills and procedure kind of model, we just can't really believe that something as simple as diet and exercise could actually be this powerful, or even if it is, none of our patients are going to do it. But if we're not talking to our patients about it and showing them how totally powerful this is, of course they're not going to want to do it, because they just believe it less. So I think all that comes into play with that. So you mentioned, what about the standard American diet is so damaging? Um, I think is, well, I take the same stance that folks like Dr. McDougall and Dr. Furman and the others would say, which is it's a combination of eating too much of the uh, less healthy foods and too little of the most healthy foods. And from the antioxidants and other plant-based compounds that help with the function of our lining of our blood vessels, the function of our immune system to help with infections, and also importantly, catch really early cancers. And the fiber that is the lifeblood of our colonic microbiome. On so many levels, the plant-based foods are key to health. And unfortunately, the percentage of calories that we get from whole plant foods is something around 10% in the standard American diet. Um, and so much of that, even more than the standard American diet being full of calories from animal products, which tend to be high in saturated fat, which is the main driver of cholesterol, which is the main cause of heart disease, is the world of ultra processed foods, and these foods that have been created in labs that are hyper palatable, so tasty, melt in your mouth, so easy to cart around in your backpack or your purse, and it stays. It has an expiration date 5 years from now. Like they've been designed in such a way to be so consumable, but the downside, of course, is that they have very little of anything that's helpful for our bodies to thrive. And so it's sort of like we're all in, uh, I don't know, we're all in diesel cars running on gasoline instead of diesel. We're just putting the wrong sorts of fuel in our body. And sure, calories will keep us awake and walking, but if you don't have the nutrition that goes along with the calories, the body fails.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Actually, just backtracking a little bit, one thing that you were talking about that it works against us, I think, is that, because the medical profession doesn't talk to people about this, even in a passing way, um, it's like it doesn't have validity. Like when appropriate, we'll talk to people to come up and, we go to church every Sunday that we can. And, a lot of old people there, they've got health problems. And we'll chat with people and they'll be talking about their diabetes and said, well, I mean, there is evidence that if you radically change your diet, you could 90% chance you could actually cure this. And it just generally, it's like just kind of a deer in the headlight look, just total incredulity. And I think part of the problem is because mainstream medicine has never really aired this possibility. It's like it has no, validity in their mind. I think, another thing that really works against us right now is there's this low carb thing just keeps rearing its ugly head every few years. And of course, latest iteration is the carnivore diet, where you eat virtually no plant matter at all. And I think to some degree people want to hear this message that eating meat is good for them. Um, and and I think it's probably true that some people, that if you're eating a lot of processed food and whatnot, and you eliminate that, it's basically a form of elimination that people will feel better, at least in the short term. But of course, we don't have any long-term data on that. And there's all the problems with no fiber or very little fiber. That fiber's got impact on virtually all aspects of our health, even our brain health. In the short term, people I think probably do get better. One of the plant-based people pointed out that these low carb carnivore type channels have far bigger followings than we do, like the plant-based community in general. So it is an uphill battle, but I think all you can do is just stay true to the message and just do what you can to try to educate people. I mean, those few people that you communicate with and they've actually improved. I mean, it's just so gratifying that that really motivates us.
Yeah, I agree. I think we when you look at the big groups, American Diabetes Association, American Heart Association, Dietary Guidelines for America, everyone is talking about eating fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes. The folks who are, highly promoting a carnivore diet are way outliers in their approach. And I agree, in a carnivore diet, when you've dropped, if it's gotten you off of, Twinkies and pizza and cheeseburgers and fries and stuff like that, with the buns and the white processed flour and all that kind of stuff. There's many things that are eliminated that were bad for your health, and that's good. But unfortunately, there just aren't any long-term health studies yet on on a large group of people who've eaten a carnivore diet. And when they do happen, and we see things like increased, colon cancer and increased diabetes and heart attacks and all that kind of stuff, then it'll be pretty sad, but it will not be surprising to the majority of physicians and other people in the healthcare arena.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I was just going on the other day about how important it is to eat green vegetables and that sort of thing. And I've been working on this chapter in the book about my book I'm trying to write about dementia. And I mean, there's incredible statistics, like people that eat like one serving of green leafy vegetables a day versus people that eat none, their dementia risk goes down 75%. Of course, if that was a pill, we'd all know about it. I mean, and the pharmacy company would be making billions of dollars off it, but unfortunately it's just not a message that gets out there. Now in the plant-based world, people sort of agree, minimize or ideally eliminate animal products, minimize junk food. But then there's these arguments on the fringes, which it's amazing how contentious they can get, about should all added fats and oils be eliminated, or is a little bit okay? What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Yeah, I agree. When everyone in the plant-based world agrees that we should be eating more plants, then there's no controversy there. There has to be some controversy to make it interesting. So that pops up with
Right.
the oils and with the omega-3s and things like that. So I I think it comes down to the individual patient that I'm working with on my stance for that. So if you've got somebody who is healthy, feels great, no existing chronic conditions, cholesterol looks fine, likes to have olive oil on her salad or dip some sourdough bread in it, I say fine, keep it up. What you're doing right now is working for you. But that advice would be very different from somebody who says, "Hey, my doc told me I'm going to need um, a cath and maybe bypass surgery. I've got lots of coronary artery disease. What do you recommend?" I'd say, I mean, what we know is trying to eat a very low fat, whole food plant based diet, by the work from Dr. Esselstyn and Dr. Ornish, is the way to go. Let's take out all oil for now. Let's get your cholesterol into normal. And let's see how you feel, 3 months from now. And those are two very different people that would get different recommendations. I don't think we have enough. I mean, if there was rock solid slam dunk science on olive oil or not, or uh, algae based omega 3, long chain omega 3s, et cetera, then there wouldn't be as much debate. But there's just studies on either side. And I think it just comes down to the patient, their goals, and where they are right now with their health.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. I mean, I think if I had coronary artery disease, symptomatic coronary artery disease, I would probably stick to the Esselstyn program to the letter, simply because that's what's been proven to work.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Now, in our situation, we don't have coronary disease. So we consume a little bit of olive oil, but it's not much. It's really not much at all. I mean, it would probably be in the order of maybe a couple tablespoons a week, if that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's probably reasonable. It'd be interesting as the science, unfolds further on that. But I know some people are, really have a hard line on it. I mean, I got to admit, sometimes a veggie salad with just a little bit of olive oil really makes it more palatable, and you can get a lot more veggies down.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. But yeah, I mean, we're really kind of getting out in the weeds. Now, you mentioned the omega 3s. I mean, that's another area that's sort of, there's controversy in the plant-based world. Yeah, we have consumed them sort of on and off, the algae-based omega 3s. What I've decided lately is we're not consuming them. And my rationale is, we eat some walnuts, we eat some chia seed, some flax. We're not eating a lot of processed oils to compete with that del-6 desaturases enzyme or whatever it is that elongates those chains into EPA and DHA. So we're probably able to synthesize that adequately. A legitimate concern, I think, is, these capsules may have been sitting in a truck that's 100 degrees, in the summertime and oxidizing. So, and I know that there is some stuff about increased risk of prostate cancer with higher levels. So for the time being, we are not taking supplemental algae-based omega 3s. But the other thing we consume is a lot of kale. I mean, and that's, green vegetables are a pretty good source. So I don't know. Does that seem reasonable to you?
Yeah, I think it's I feel for the back and forth and uncertainty that you mentioned, because I've gone through the same stuff. You see, very smart, well-read, well-researched folks like Dr. Furman, Joel Furman, and Dr. Michael Greger, who have delved into this as well. And I think Dr. Greger is pretty straightforward when he says, "Hey, there's data on either side of it." The Sherzais, Dean and Aisha, who do a good podcast, Your Brain On, did one on omega 3s recently, and you just see that there's data on either side. And some folks would say, "Hey, if you've got the money." And you say have a strong family history of Alzheimer's disease, it's probably not going to hurt you, and it might help you. And so take it and try to take a version that's likely to be pure and not degraded. And so I think Dr. Furman has a nice product. I was looking at it just the other day. It's a liquid form that you keep in a fridge and that is in a dark bottle, and it comes out to I think about $1 a day for the cost of it. Um, but I think, 5 or 10 years from now, there's a chance that we'll have more definitive information. And so I think it's totally fair to say I'll wait for those 5 years and circle back and see how it goes, as compared to, well, I think I can afford it. I'll take it in the meantime, and it's probably not going to hurt me. So personally, I eat lots of short chain omega-3s in the form of ground flax and chia, walnuts, etc. Currently, I'm not taking a long chain, but yeah, we just need to follow the science and see. And I don't discourage people one way or the other, and just try to encourage them to make their own decision based on what we know.
Now, are there any supplements that you do recommend for people on a whole food plant-based diet?
Yes, so I think B12 is the one that is best not to mess around with. Some folks say, oh, well, just, don't wash your carrots or your potatoes very much when you pull them from the garden and you'll get enough. And I think that's risky unless you're getting a yearly B12 level and then you're solidly keeping on track of it. I think in general, everyone should just be supplementing. For folks who take a daily vitamin, most will have a B12 in there, and that's fine. I don't like taking pills, and so I'll take, I think I have a 1,000 microgram of B12 that I try to take on some sort of basis, and then we'll get my level checked. But yeah, B12, even though we eat a lot of nutritional yeast and stuff, it's really hard to get it consistently from diet, and so that's a good one to supplement. But vitamin D is one that certainly has controversy as well. I try to get out under the sun as much as possible, but without getting a sunburn. And during the winter, sometimes when it's a stretch of cloudy days, I'm taking some supplements here and there for vitamin D. But I think, again, that's one where lots of studies show that people with low vitamin D have increased risk for all sorts of things, chronic conditions and mortality, et cetera, higher mortality. But again, the studies that then say, okay, well, then we're going to put people on vitamin D and 10 years from now, see how they did, those typically don't pan out. So I think vitamin D is probably best to get naturally. If you happen to live in the Arctic Circle and you aren't getting enough vitamin D from the sun, or higher up in general, away from the equator during the winter months, is a good time to supplement, perhaps. But that's what we, to the best of our knowledge.
Yeah, I know these. I mean, it's interesting how these things are not sort of slam dunk, clear cut. Dr. Greger's book, How Not to Age, he's got some stuff about how actually fracture risk goes up with higher intake of supplemental vitamin D. I work indoors. I don't get outside much. I mean, in the summertime, it's a lot better. We get out on our bikes quite a bit. But I'll go several months. I'm not getting a lot of exposure. So the position I've taken is I'm taking lately 4,000 international units. Maybe that's a little too much. I'm not sure. We're getting that time of the year we're going to get outside. It'll be less important. And I've had levels measured at the end of the summer when I'm not supplementing, and it was still kind of in that low end of the normal range. So we do take the supplement, but these things are not as straightforward as people might think that they are. Years ago, I used to take a ton of supplements, and I did this program in anti-aging and functional medicine. They were big on supplements. And I realize now, it's the most important thing is really what's the food. And there could be downsides to some of these things. Like even vitamin B12, apparently in men with extraordinarily high B12 levels, it might actually facilitate lung cancer. Now, it might just be because those higher levels because they're eating meat. I'm not sure. But, then there's things like supplemental calcium increases coronary artery calcification, increases cardiac event rates. Folic acid is thought, rather than consuming folate from food, is thought to increase breast cancer. So I think that the best precautionary approach is to eat the highest quality diet you can and rely on supplements as little as you can. You don't want to forego the B12 though, because you don't want to end up with pernicious anemia or, you know, dementia. So that's sort of the approach that we've been taking.
I think it's a good approach. I mean, I think when you eat a tomato, you know you're eating a tomato. When you're taking a supplement, there's very little reassurance that you have that the supplement has what it says, that it doesn't have
Mm-hmm.
extra things, that because it's just not a well-regulated system. So if you're going to take supplements, in general, when I talk to my patients, I say, minimize the number of supplements you're on. If you're taking a supplement, make sure you're taking one that it has third-party accuracy testing for. Yeah, just to make sure you're getting what you're paying for, and yeah, I think your approach to the vitamin D is reasonable. Like you said, it's not as clear as people think. Most physicians agree that having a level under 20 is not good, and so supplement to above 20. There's debate about whether it should be above 30 and whether there's some benefit of getting into 50. And yeah, it's just not slam dunk, unfortunately. But that is medicine. And I'm still blown away when some docs speak very black and white about things. And I am of the group that feels that so little in life is black and white. And that's certainly true when it comes to some of these supplements that we're talking about.
Yeah, there was a study came out by some consumer group in the last couple of months. I forget the real details, but basically they did a survey of various protein powder supplements, and it was like 40% of them had heavy metals in them. And in fact, the plant-based ones were the worst for some reason. I mean, I'm pretty convinced you don't need to take a supplement. Anyway, we have some protein powder. Once in a while, we throw a scoop in a smoothie or something. But I don't see any point in buying it. I think there might be some risk in fact in taking those supplements. And I'll go on Chronometer and do kind of a rough calculation of my intake for a day here and there. About the lowest I would ever get on protein is about 70 grams, about the lowest. Typically, I'm up around 120, sometimes 140, which is plenty. It's funny, we went out biking for the first time this season and put on my bike shirt, which I hadn't had on since September, and I've been doing some heavy weightlifting, and the thing barely fits now. And of course, I'm eating entirely plant-based. Uh, some form of legume or whatever every day, whole grains. So clearly I'm getting enough, you know. Um, so
Yeah.
I personally think the perseveration on the importance of protein, I think it's a negative thing. Like there's a lot of YouTube videos of that. People saying you've got to get more protein, you've got to get more protein. And it's like, why? It's so easy to get adequate protein. Clearly I'm getting more than enough because, I'm growing out of shirts and whatnot. I'd say probably 75% of my shirts don't even fit now. Uh, that's just from working out with weights 3 or 4 times a week and eating entirely plant-based, just being sort of cognizant, eat whole grains, eat some legumes every day, throw in a bit of nuts and seeds, and I'm good.
Yeah, I
Uh,
agree. I agree. I think, I like keeping that number of zero point 0.8 to maybe 1 gram per kilogram of healthy body weight of protein, and that is easily met by someone eating a whole food plant-based diet. It's easy to exceed that most days when you've had, beans or soy or something else a couple of times in a day. And so, there's most of the emphasis on protein is a marketing thing because those folks are selling their protein supplement or whatnot. And so, it's one of those, again, it's one of those very gray topics because you need enough protein to, as you're working out, to maintain muscle mass and to slow the muscle mass loss as we get older, that sarcopenia, sure. But also studies when you're talking about longevity, right? It's the lower protein is more associated with living longer than higher protein. And so you were just kind of aiming for that sweet spot, not too little, not too much, and be reasonable about it.
yeah, no, I think that zero point 0.8 to 1.0 per kilo is probably plenty for most people. In Dr. Greger's book, How Not to Age, he does an analysis on that. And his take on the thing about, sarcopenia as you get older, it's very, very interesting, which is that if the problem is primarily with the frail elderly. Like I'm 66, so technically I'm elderly, but I don't consider myself frail by any means at all. Um, there's no evidence that giving a supplemental protein powder to a non-frail elderly person actually helps them with their muscle strength. The only thing that helps them actually is weight training, like resistance training. That's the only thing that helps. So supplemental amino acids, supplemental protein powder, it does not help. Interestingly, he made a statement which I thought was fascinating, which is that a lot of this age-related decline in muscle may be due to sort of the chronic acidosis that we experience if you're constantly eating animal products. And of course, that has to be buffered. And I don't know the exact biochemistry, but a lot of that buffering comes from muscle tissue and maybe part of the reason why people lose as much muscle as they do as they age, which I think is just fascinating. And I was just listening to a dietitian who I just kind of recently discovered on YouTube. Her name is Jennifer Moore. I'd love to talk to her. She's a plant-based dietitian, and she made reference to that as well, is that the chronic acidosis that you get from eating animal products all the time, it may be instrumental in why people lose so much muscle as they get older. So the paradox is, Joyce and I were just talking about, the paradox is people are being encouraged to take more protein to solve their muscle loss issues, but it might actually be making it worse. And what they and actually, I think in Dr. Greger's book, he's got some information about green vegetables actually did help with muscle strength. Yeah, so I think the whole protein thing is overblown for sure. Now, when you have a patient, I guess you kind of use the incremental approach to get people to switch over. Is that what you do? Or do you offer them the opportunity to just jump right in and make radical changes?
Yeah, a lot of us know what works for us, right? And I think some folks I need to just dip the big toe in, and that's the only thing that works for me. And other people say, no, I can jump right in, and man, I'm gonna be along for the ride long term. And so first know they self, and then I think for the folks that jump right in, they feel better quicker, they see the results quicker. But it's also a little bit riskier if you're on blood pressure medicines and insulin and some of these other medicines. So they got to be talking to the lifestyle practitioner or their primary doc very closely to make sure that they're weaning those medicines, because very soon they're not going to need them. And of course, they can get low blood pressure or low sugar, which is quite dangerous if you're not peeling off those medicines in a hurry. But for other folks, it might be a 5-year period as they little by little introduce a little bit more veggies, a little bit less meat, a little bit more beans, etc. And if that works for them, go for it. Let's do it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I did the whole hog thing, like just boom, changed overnight. I mean, and as I said, I got some really incredible results. The one thing though that was a downside was a lot of gastrointestinal distress initially, until my gut got used to all that extra fiber.
Yeah,
But
good
then
point.
you get used to it. The other thing that you got to get used to is you got to get used to eating a higher volume of food, which I eat a lot of food, which some people would see that as an upside. To me, it almost gets a little bit annoying at times. Now, here's a question for you. What do you think about this, use of the GLP-1 agonists as a mean to deal with weight loss issues? What are your thoughts on that? Do you think that's a positive trend or a negative trend?
Well, it's an interesting trend. It's so these are the medicines like Wegovy and Ozempic that are quite popular now. Ozempic was primarily for helping with diabetes, but then we're seeing it used more and more for weight. And I think it helps a certain subset of people who are just have not been able to find a way to do to have control of eating, say, the calorie rich ultra palatable foods, the ultra processed foods that we were talking about, etc. And if you get on a medicine that makes you lose your appetite and get a little bit nauseated and whatnot, then you're less likely to overeat on these foods. And then perhaps that is a sort of way to help you jumpstart into little by little eating the healthier foods. So I think it makes sense for some folks. I like everything in medicine. These drugs have costs, and side effects, and I think if you, for the folks who go on them, it should be seen as a band-aid while you are making big changes in the mental game and learning how to batch cook and learning how to meal prep and, watching videos on plant-based cooking and all these kinds of things. But if the idea is, well, I'm just going to get on this medicine for the rest of my life to help me keep my weight down, I think they're doing docs and patients stuck in that scenario. It's a disservice to the potential of using them shortly and then getting off of them. Is how I see it. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds reasonable. One of my concerns is the idea that person's eating a terrible diet. That's why they gain the weight. They're not getting nutrition from their food, which is driving them to overeat. They go on the GLP-1 agonist, they eat less, and so they're getting even less of the nutrients that their body is craving. So I agree. It would have to be coupled with, counseling on how to actually eat properly. Now, are there any other, you mentioned that in the bio it was mentioned that you use other modalities aside from just the plant-based diet, other lifestyle modalities to help people. What are those other modalities that you work with people on?
Sure. So, the in lifestyle medicine, we talk about the 6 pillars, and I also like the Rochester Lifestyle Medicine Institute tacks on a couple of extras that I like a lot as well. So the big 6 are trying to eat a plant-based diet as much as possible, getting regular daily movement or physical activity, exercise, however you want to look at it, and then getting regenerative, restorative sleep. Dealing with chronic stress, avoiding toxic substances in your life like cigarettes, heavy alcohol use, and then having strong, loving social connections. And Dean Ornish simplifies this by what's his great phrase: eat well, move more, stress less, love more, I think is his little phrase, which is so nice and gets to the core of it. Rochester Lifestyle Medicine tacks on time in nature, sense of purpose, and finding joy, which I think are 3 pretty essential things as well. And so, you could have somebody who's eaten just an outstandingly healthy diet, but is getting 4 hours of sleep a night because they're, hooked on some video game that's keeping them up at night, or, going down YouTube rabbit holes every night. And 4 hours of sleep, it catches up and it affects us in so many ways, right? So we got to look at the whole person, and talk about all these things. And if you get all those, man, if you're doing a pretty good job on all those 6 to 9 areas, it's not a cure-all, and it's not to say that something couldn't still happen to your health, but chances are way higher that you're going to feel well and do well for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, those other pillars are really important. I've had issues with sleep for a long time, and we moved to a new community about 2 years ago and started with a new dentist. And it was very interesting because he commented that I'd grind my teeth. And I said, oh, yeah, I know that. He says, well, that's a sign of sleep apnea. And I had suspicion of sleep apnea for years, actually. And I'd seen a sleep specialist said, no, you don't have sleep apnea. You don't sort of fit the profile or whatever. So I got tested and I do have sleep apnea. Not terrible. But so I was fitted with one of those dental appliances where it makes my jaw forward just a little bit, just 6 or 7 millimeters, and it makes a huge difference. It's amazing, and I'd been having issues with daytime sleepiness, which is kind of the classic symptom, and it's much better. It's much better than it was. just with that fairly simple intervention. So, um, yeah, I mean, these other pillars are very, very important. One thing, the sleep is still not completely dialed in for me. So actually, both Joyce and I are experimenting with cutting back on caffeine, and just having it strictly first thing in the morning for now, and maybe even consider stopping it altogether and see how that goes. But those things are important. Do you ever use fasting as a modality for anybody?
Sure. I'm a big fan of fasting. I know you had one of our friends and compatriots, Dr. Clapper, on your
Hmm.
podcast before, who of course has done lots of fasting work at True North with Alan Goldhammer. I happen to live in the same town that True North is in Santa Rosa, and had the
Really?
pleasure of getting to chat with Alan
Well, that's
um,
awesome.
and so fasting is a great modality. We're there's so many different kinds of time restricted eating, where you just say I'm going to wrap up dinner by around 8 and not eat breakfast until maybe 9 or 10 the next day. And so it gives your body lots of time to do other work other than digesting. And there's the picking a day that you do nothing but water, or doing one of these long-term medically supervised fasts at True North or one of the other quality centers around. And then there's also the fasting mimicking diet that was developed by Walter Longo, which is quite fascinating. And through his products, Prolon and L-Nutra, uh, at Love Life Telehealth, we're lucky enough to work with the great team at L-Nutra, to where folks can be at home eating a very low calorie but well balanced diet for 5 days that sort of tricks your body into a semi fasting state, but with less of the side effects and hunger pangs, perhaps. So it doesn't require you being in an inpatient facility. And yeah, I mean, they've got great El Nutra through Walter Longo's work. They have great studies showing people's weight come down and their diabetic control improving, and stuff like that. So all sorts of
Yeah.
great possibilities out there.
Yeah, no, I think it's potentially a really good modality. The longest I've ever fasted is 24 hours, and I used to do it fairly regularly.
Mm-hmm.
Joyce fairly recently did a 5-day water fast. And of course, there's a couple days there where she's kind of miserable, but then she said she just felt great. Uh, yeah, it's amazing. All these different inflammatory conditions and stuff that can get better. And I saw an interview with Dr. Goldhammer where he just kind of mentioned in passing that elevated lipoprotein A, which is something that I have, which is primarily a genetic condition, can get better with that.
Mm-hmm.
So that motivates me to give that a try. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, it's fascinating stuff. We've been going on for 75 minutes now, and we said we are going to do an hour. So I want to be respectful of your time, but thank you so much for joining us. Perhaps we can do it again sometime, and we will post links to your the telehealth, the love.life telehealth, and your Instagram, so people can reach out to you.
Well, thank you, Lee. This was fun. Love chatting with you about this stuff, and getting a chance to get to know you better and to reach out to your audience. So thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, well, you're welcome. It was my pleasure.